Hey y'all, it is Eli with Steel and Style, and I got Caleb here.
It's good to be back together finally.
Oh God, and we are literally together.
Yeah.
Well, not
not
sexually,
biblical
not
sense.
sexually. No. Although I'm not opposed. No, I'm just kidding.
Been staying at his house all week, and I can confirm only a little bit of footsie here and there.
The coffee almost went on my guns there. I thought that I greatly regretted my decision to make you laugh while you were drinking coffee.
It's a hazard.
So listen, we are together. Yes, we are. Not doing any video. I apologize for that, but it will be available on YouTube and Spotify per normal regulations. I guess.
Standard issue.
Right. And so we're on a little bit of a, here's the deal. It's been a crazy past few weeks.
Yeah.
I was at the
It's been a crazy year.
Oh God, don't even get me started on this year, dude. This year has been absolutely freaking nuts. I mean, it's just been one of those years that will go down in history. I mean, it's probably been the most active year for me.
Yeah.
And probably you as well, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I've been literally over the world, been to Germany and back and a few other places in between. I know you've been traveling a lot more than me, but in terms of what I was doing before, it's a lot of movement.
Oh, I've only had 1 month this entire year where I wasn't traveling. I mean, one. That's it.
And you were just traveling, and now I'm here with you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I just got back from the Audrain Concours d'Elegance, which I'm going to be honest with you, of all the traveling I've done, that was the most stressful because I had my car with me.
Yep.
And I don't ever trailer or bring that car anywhere like that. So I was absolutely just...
Well, doing that through hurricane world,
right?
Probably not the best thing too, right?
The hurricane hit. Luckily, we just got the edge of it here, where we are. As you can tell, and I really haven't been a good host in the fact that we haven't got to drive around and really see a lot of stuff. Yeah, this has been a crazy week of work. I mean, crazy. Up late.
We have been driving a lot.
We have, not in the direction.
Spinning our tires, as you were.
Yeah, so we've broke a lot of photography equipment this trip and had to make many trips to Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, we caught the edge of the hurricane. But we the week after that, I was going up to Audrain, so that was kind of stressful.
Sure.
But anyway, in fact, my trailer where it was, the trailer was pretty much where the kind of carnage started, and the trailer was underwater. So we had to actually delay the trip a couple of days because we had to wait for the trailer to not be underwater.
Yeah,
as
recover
it does. Yes,
one needs it to be
above water
to actually use it.
So, anyways, with all of that said, we always make excuses of why we're not regular. We try to be regular. We try to have our fiber in our diet.
I promise we'll be getting better. That's all I can say.
Yeah, we'll get better with it. But we appreciate you sticking around. So this episode will be semi-rushed. I don't want to say it, but this is the last thing we're doing before Caleb goes to the airport. Unfortunately, I've loved having him out, and I'd like to have him out again. The issue is we've just burned up every bit of our time working. So it's one of those deals where
you got to keep a roof over the head, and then
right.
It's great we get to do this in person and do the fringe benefit of all this. Especially, I know it's the last thing we're doing. But
we had planned to do we're going to have 20 episodes recorded.
Yeah, we can every night we'll just do 2 or 3.
Yeah,
throw on a movie with no audio and just hang out.
It was not that. It was.
We learned a lot.
Whoa, God. It was in fact
patience was the virtue of the week.
I looked at the Flash so much that I actually had, and I don't get headaches.
We lost
yesterday. I couldn't do it. I had such a bad headache.
And then the Flash unit crumbled in your hands.
So we had to go to Charlotte.
That Nazi guy in Last Crusade.
That's exactly
just turning
what it
to dust.
Like.
It just crumbled.
Yeah,
I hear you taking it off, and I just hear.
Yep.
It sounded like someone stomped on Legos. Just all over.
Destroyed, and then I was pissed, and it was great. So let's get into though what this episode's about.
The meat and potatoes of the Steel.
The meat and taters, right. So, of course, we're going to talk about some Steel, and this is one that's a little bit, what do you want to call it? Inspired, I guess. You are taking a break from some James Bond stuff.
A little bit of a palate cleanser after the book, which, we're in editing right now. So, as all said, the licensed troubleshooter's out.
Go buy Caleb's book.
Yeah, we are the pre-sale on Kickstarter concluded. Huge thanks to everyone who's listening to the show that took part in that. We crested over the $600,000 mark in the 11th hour. You're a good friend, Charlie Brown. But, Eli's also a contributor on a few sections regarding firearms that he is very well versed in because, frankly, whatever I could have done justice on there wouldn't have tracked with the passion, and it comes across on the page really well. Some of his photos are in there, so his personal guns that I really wanted included.
My police positive.
Your police positive is the first gun. Yeah.
Isn't the Remington Rand in there?
Yeah, I believe we used your Remington Rand as well. So there's some really cool stuff. I don't want to dwell too much on that, but all that to say, when you live with that stuff for 2 straight years after 4 years of doing the social media stuff on it, there's more to what I've enjoyed over my whole life than just the Bond stuff. It was a really fun angle, and it is a fun angle. I'm walking away from it. Don't worry on that. And there's plenty to collect, but there's a lot of really cool guns in the pop culture world out there that I really care about as well. And so, I'm not going to go full Daniel Craig, who after he did Spectre said he'd rather slash his wrists than do another Bond film. I'm just saying, you know what? Rather than getting to that point, let's do some other really cool stuff. And that's kind of where this episode, thanks to our friends at guns.com, leads us.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. The way you went was very fun to me. You kind of have latched on to Indiana Jones, which I know you've always been an Indiana Jones fan.
My dad, he was not a Bond guy at all. My grandfather actually gifted me Bond movies. My dad's hero stuff was like the Star Wars and the Indy, but he never really, we watched the early Star Wars, but Indy was what was like the consistent movie that was on. But it was funny to me. It always felt like the Bond wardrobe and pieces and things were less like cosplay, not like the full suit, like you're not wearing a dinner jacket everywhere you go, but like the casual style, the pieces, like I could wear that in my daily life and it wouldn't feel like I was putting on a costume necessarily. You get in a full suit at a diner, sure. But because it's 60 years of cinema, there's a lot of casual, Thunderball has some of the greatest beach attire ever, second only to Magnum PI in my opinion. And
damn right.
But, Daniel Craig's Bond took on a really casual tilt. So a lot of like really cool polos and pieces like that. But in the last 3 years, there's been a really cool resurgence of quintessential style, and it's a lot more normal. And I think, frankly, people are a little more relaxed on what you do wear. We got to the mid-aughts, and everyone was wearing the skinniest clothes humanly possible. And now people could dress, aside from like a 20s flapper, I think most people are kind of just dressing as they like. And as long as it's thoughtful, it looks great. And so for me, it was like, I went hiking in Alaska. And when I went to go do that last summer, I was like, I kind of want to get not like a full indie costume, but I wanted to get like a field shirt. I'm like, I want a little piece here and there that kind of feels like it. And honestly, they kind of just spiraled downhill because I was already wearing like the Henleys and stuff full time. It just works. And frankly, I work from home full time, and so it's very functional, the wardrobe. And that spiraled. Now I've got the Hamilton from Dial of Destiny, which released last summer as well. So I go on the heels of coming out of Alaska. Indiana Jones has never worn a watch before ever. And then the newest movie, he's got his dad's watch, which for me, that's Sean Connery. That's James Bond. So by the transitive property, that is in fact James Bond's watch. So it was a fun one to add to the collection now because of just the size and the way it looks, and it's very unique.
It's a unique watch.
It's a unique watch.
Tank watches in general are cool.
Especially how small it is. Like tank watches today are huge. The one in Dial of Destiny is huge. But this is a period correct one.
The one in Dial of Destiny was not a period correct watch of that period.
Yes.
It was
a new movement model
which for the movie. And I'm sure
Disney tie-in, the whole 9 yards.
And I'm sure they scaled it up just for screen.
Yeah, well, I think they also did because a lot of folks, I'm a smaller guy. I mean, I'm wearing a pretty small band. It's almost completely up to the last hole there. So the smaller watch, I don't mind. I get it. This is a pretty small case. So the larger case, it's not huge, right?
But people don't realize that was how
very common.
That was the way you did watches.
No, absolutely.
This would have been absolutely absurd in the 20s and 30s.
Absolutely.
You can't see it today. But you can't see it. But I'm pointing at my R Watch Co. Magnum tribute. This size watch would have been insane, unheard of. Yeah. And I think you just hit it on the head, and I think that I really actually think we should move back to the smaller dress watches. I love the gold ones, like the Groom Precision that I wear a lot. I bought that for my wedding. The really thin watch that's really understated, fits under a nice fitted cuff sleeve. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be oversized because frankly, the oversized watches that have become really normalized, not saying that the Magnum's oversized because I think... Well, this is as big as I would go.
Right. It's as large, a GMT style case like that is as large as you ought to go because anything bigger, especially when you get like the domed crystal and everything like that, it is just a clanging machine. You can't wear it. It's like the girls that get like the 8-inch nails and then they're confused why they can't type at work. Well, sure. You put on...
it's like Savannah got that clicky clacky thing to put on her keyboard so she could have, use of it with her nails.
Right. She doesn't have the Edward Scissorhand ones.
But for sure.
People do that, and they're like, well, why can't I do my daily life? Because you're not doing something that's functional. And I think that's the big thing about the steel and style, because I know we haven't gotten to the steel yet. But on the style aspect of everything we're talking about, I think the functionality aspect of that really means a lot. And that's why I like smaller, understated pieces, because they still speak volumes about what you think and how you feel and all that. Like, you see a 40s wristwatch on somebody, it says something. And not even that I'm trying to make that impression, but it's one of those things that happens. If you don't acknowledge it, then you're just lying to yourself.
Well, and I'm a big fan of dress Rolexes.
Yeah. The ones you have are gorgeous.
Well, and I know that a lot of folks associate Rolex with the GMT, with the, all of those large case.
The adventure watches, right? The divers, the GMT.
The big tool watches. It's funny, and a little bit of a sidetrack there while we're talking about dress watches. Then we'll get into the steel. When I was at the car show, and most people listening are gun guys, so you're gonna understand where I'm going. When I was at the car show, so the Concord Elegance is not a car show. I say car show just so you kind of get the idea, but it's not a car show. It is an extreme collection of some of the most beautiful and well kept cars in their categories in the world. And specifically, this is the Odd Ring, so you have a lot of Northeast influence. Whereas, like for instance, Pebble Beach is a lot of California. It's in California, so it's
you'd belong.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and of course, as you know, I have a lowrider, which was extremely interesting because I was coming in behind a 1936 Packard, and I think I had some Jag behind me, like a 60s Jag or maybe a 60s Ferrari competition. And in the middle is this giant 18-foot long purple, flame
covered,
white walls busting. I think I might have been playing like Tupac or something like that.
On airbags.
Rolling into the Breakers, which is one of the biggest mansions in Newport. I mean, that's where the show was, is in the backyard. You're between the cliffs of right there at the ocean and that giant house.
Yeah.
So it's a wild experience. But while I was up there, the judges came around, and of course they're wearing their suits and their ties. All their ties were all drained, judge tie. I mean, they're very prim, very proper. And I was watching everybody, and of course, when they get to me, it ends up being a wrestling promo.
Absolutely.
And maybe that lost me. I don't know. I came home with third, but I think there was a little bit of animosity for having a
people weren't ready for Stone Cold.
I just think there was a lot of things that they weren't used to that was in that package there. But the one guy, and I noticed it, which when you start to get into watches, I'm sure you do, you'll notice people's watches.
Oh, yeah.
And he was the only one wearing a watch that I could see. Mm-hmm. And it was a fairly large Rolex. And I don't know enough about Rolexes to be able to quickly tell you
the number,
but especially new ones. Older ones are different. But newer ones, I kind of, and again, I'm sitting there worried about winning a car show and, not really what
you get only about 3% brain real estate to worry about. Right. You're like, oh, cool, Rolex. Anyway,
yep. Back to the car, and he had a jacket on, so it was it was halfway covered. I was actually wearing a. If you saw the picture, I was wearing that white collared shirt, but with the sweater on it, and I had the sweater cuffed. So my watch was fairly visible. Mm-hmm.
Well, you got a sweater on the bottom half of your arm.
I do,
anyway.
With my
arm hair is no joke.
Well, so I was wearing my 1963 Rolex, Oyster Date.
Yeah, that's on the alligator strap.
On the alligator strap, right?
Beautiful.
So I was wearing that because, of course, I have a 1963 car.
Yeah.
Because that's how things work, right?
You match things. That's the rule.
Like when I got the 68 Super, I got a 68 Rolex to go with it,
Checkmate.
I mean, it's these things.
And that's the gangster Rolex, too.
Well, right. The gold, that was the gold Oyster Date.
The
two-tone on the Jubilee band.
Yep. That's a cartel watch with the cartel gun.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but anyways, I had that watch on. I kept, moving my hands and stuff. Mm-hmm. You know how I talk. You're very similar in that. And the guy, we got done with the main questions for judging. So they were just kind of walking around asking like little things, right? And the guy comes up to me and the first thing he says is, what's your tag say? And I go, and I'm kind of sitting there, and again, I'm in full, like, I was telling him the production numbers, talking about the 289 being the first year production. I mean, I was so in car mode. I was like, what the fuck is he talking about? And so I look at my tag and my heart drops because I had meant to take the gangster as fuck tag off. I really did. I mean, I know that
you were going to roll up to the mansion.
Right. I've done some things, but I was like, you know what?
He has a brain.
And here's the deal: is like if you win second to first, you drive across the block. I think I'm not even really upset I didn't win second or first. I'm just upset I didn't get to put my car
drive.
Up in front.
That would have been really cool.
But anyways, I had done that because I thought, well, if I win, I don't want all these posh, You don't want
people clutching pearls.
Yeah.
The good heavens and the fainting.
And so I look and I go, what do you think it says? And the guy, and he was older, but I don't know, he had a lot of younger mannerisms. He goes, I think it says gangster as fuck. And I said, you're correct. That is correct, right on the money. And he goes, oh my God, that's awesome. And he kind of chatted with me a little bit. And he kept, when he talked to me, I felt like a woman because he never was looking me in the eyes. He kept looking at something. And of course, as I talked with my hands chest level, he kept looking at my chest. I thought, man, is this what a woman feels like all the time?
Well, you leave your shirt so open too.
Right. Well, yeah.
He could be looking at the
that's
goods.
true. That's true. He, I mean, I do leave it out there, but he then goes, hey man, I got another question for you. I said, yeah, what's up? He goes, your Rolex is an early 60s Rolex, isn't he was a big, come to find out, he was a big watch guy. And he goes, your Rolex is an early 60s Rolex, isn't it? And I was like, yeah. How did you know that? I'm into watches, that sort of thing. He kind of stopped and he paused and he kind of gave me this like squinted eye look and he goes, is your Rolex the same year as your car? And I went, yeah, actually it is. It is 1963. He goes, dude, that's a level of detail that I've never seen at one of these concourses. He's like, very rarely would you ever notice that somebody was wearing a watch.
Intentionally matched
and that
to
is
the car.
To the exception of the folks who do like the Model Ts and they'll do a full cosplay
I believe
of
that. Yeah.
that. That's an exception.
Right.
It's very rare for someone to be in plain, not plain, but in
dressed
modern
normally.
clothes with something that kind of ties in like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, well, it's a subtle touch. And my outfit was a little bit 60s inspired too with the sweater.
With the sweater, except like a polo sweater with a white shirt.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I was like, kind of trying to just tie it in a classy way. And I was like, but I was like, you're not really into guns, are you? He's like, no. I'm like, well, if you were, you would understand. You would kind of understand that because in the gun world, that's a thing. You have a birth your gun. You match your watches to your gun.
Oh yeah.
Everything kind of has to go.
It all ties together. Well, because it's part of the daily kit, right? Like, most of the time, people, we've talked about this before, spend so much time like on these like perfect EDC or like daily carry bag kind of videos. And the reality is, even the most ardent, like thoughtful people, one of my favorite examples that I'll always throw out there, and I'm sure, Ken's probably said similar as well, is like when I talk to Jack Carr, he says it on videos, he's like, I'm lucky with kids and everything else that I've got my wallet, my watch, and my gun. Those are the priorities. And, because of that, you've got two things that are on your body at all times. One of them, you hopefully never have to get out in public, which is that firearm. But that watch gets to be part of that personality as well. And, when you're thoughtfully curating, crafting, and buying these handguns, you want it all to tie together. And it's one of those things. You get an older gun, you're like, okay, what watch am I going to get to match that? Or vice versa. In my case, it was a vice versa, which is how we, we'll segue into the steel part of this episode.
Yes, thank you for finally.
Yeah. I think that was a clean.
I was
that was a clean transition.
I was sitting here thinking, like, I think we can get back on track.
We can because I bought this Hamilton. I bought the Indy Hamilton, the vintage version of the same watch worn in the movie, and I immediately was like, okay, cool. I've wanted the Indiana Jones revolver for a very long time.
Well, which one? Because that's the problem.
Yeah, and I knew because again, I'm a gun guy. I spend a lot of time on the Internet Movie Firearms database and looking at stills.
What an amazing site!
Oh my gosh, the Wikipedia for guns. It's a Bible. It's a place you can go and live and.
It sometimes disappoints me. Especially being in the 1911s. Yep. I always go there and I'm like, oh, this dude carried a 1911, but there was never really any good shots of it. And it turns out it's a damn Star.
Yep.
Star Model B.
Which is probably why there wasn't any good shots of it.
Right. They were trying to hide that it was
masking
a
it. So they do a good job of getting like screen captures and stuff. But yeah, so let's go back to the original Indy, which is Raiders, because even Raiders had a handful of firearms. And actually, two examples of a very similar revolver which gets us into the Smith & Wesson model hand ejector 2 and the model 1917, which for all intents and purposes are the same gun. Only difference being one was like a British or Canadian contract pistol, 4.55 Webley, which is the hand ejector 2, whereas the 17 was kept in God's caliber and 45 ACP with the old half moon clips.
Yep.
So in the beginning of the movie, in the big temple sequence, he's got which is interesting, right? He's got 2 of these revolvers that are the same gun, different cartridge, but they're both cut down. They're both cut down to a 4-inch barrel. The Smith & Wesson on the 1917 side, in the beginning of the movie, you see him draw it out. He's all covered in the spider webs and stuff. Belloc just got him down. He's taking the idol. He's disarming him, and you see this really great shot of that gun. They cut the barrel down to 4, and they actually retain the half moon oval front sight. Yeah. And that's the gun that you see first. You actually see that gun again when he's packing to go hunt down Ravenwood. And he says, oh, Marcus, you know what kind of a cautious fellow I am, or something to that effect. And he throws the gun in the bag, and you again see that oval sight. But when the gun...
That's a clear picture of the gun.
It's a very clear photo in the suitcase. Really cool. It's little details like that, too, by the way.
That'd be a cool one to recreate.
It'd be a really cool one to recreate, an overhead. But also, it's just... those movies are so cool because they do such a good job of bringing the period together. But like the luggage, just like little things that you just wouldn't even think about, seeing it all together just like immerses you in that world so well. And so the gun in the luggage with the whole 9 yards, it just works. And so we see the gun again in the bar fight sequence, which then later we get to Cairo and we see the hand ejector 2. Famous sword fight sequence. We watched the indie documentary this week while we were working because it's really good.
On Disney Plus.
It's on Disney Plus. They released it to go along with Dial of Destiny, but they actually did a really good job.
I think it's better than Dial of Destiny.
I think it's better than the film by far, and it's like a full celebration of Harrison Ford's career through the lens of Indiana Jones. But they really do a good job of going through his whole career. He's interviewed. They pull interviews with like Sean Connery on the scenes of The Last Crusade, and a bunch of other actors that appeared throughout the series come back. Definitely recommend the watch. But there's a couple of really cool things that come out of that. First and foremost, everyone knows the story, or you probably have heard the story before the documentary, which is that Harrison Ford famously had dysentery. I think what he said in the documentary was, I was really enjoying the food on the way in, not so much on the way out. And he said he couldn't stay out of his trailer for more than maybe 30 minutes at a time. And so he's talking to Spielberg on their way on set, and apparently this poor guy that he's doing the sword fight scene
guy
had been working for weeks because it was going to be this crazy
3 weeks.
Yeah, that's what he said, like a whip/sword fight. Because George Lucas was really big on Indy's dedicated weapon being the whip.
Yeah,
the bullwhip wasn't just going to be an accessory; it was going to be a weapon. And he walks over to Steve and he's like, "I'm not going to be able to do this, man." He's like, "Why don't I just shoot the sumbitch?" And so he does. And him and Steven both kind of take credit for that. No one really remembers, but
I think that was even more of an indie moment than a whip fight.
I think it fits Indy just as well as the Han shot first scene.
Yeah.
It defines the character really well.
Yeah.
Indy looks exhausted. He's like, no.
He's just tired of this.
He's tired of this, yeah. Because the whole movie, right? And we talked about this before, if you grew up and you didn't watch Indy and you revisited it later and you grew up about the time we did, the same like chain event kind of movie thing happens really, really well with like the Pirates of the Caribbean. Things just kind of keep happening, and you're like, oh, well, he'd be dead if this didn't happen. And then something miraculous happens, and then the action sequence just spirals on.
And you think about it, like how, like if this was a real human in a real situation, how exhausted they would be.
Oh my gosh!
By the climax of that movie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's not Roger Moore's James Bond with his hair perfectly in place throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Indy is bloody, beaten. His shirt doesn't survive more than 15 minutes half the time. It's not the years, it's the mileage, which apparently was a Harrison Ford ad lib, which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I think it really fits the character, and it makes Harrison Ford really cool. But the Cairo gun, which I think also is technically the Ravenwood gun. I have to look at the stills for that, but it's weird because I think it creates the continuity error with the suitcase. But all that to say, is a Smith & Wesson model hand ejector 2, which was like the British or Canadian contract gun, the 4.55 Webley. That gun with the 4-inch barrel has a different front sight.
Triangular.
It has a ramped speed front sight.
Yeah.
Kind of like that kind of shark fin kind of look. And those were actually common back in the day because of the half moon creating snag issues in a holster. Created an issue with the draw stroke. And so a popular modification at the time was creating these like low profile sights, which also, fun fact, ties back to Han Solo. His modified blaster in the books of in the Star Wars continuation books. It's talked about in a little further detail, and you can see it. All the sights are sawing off that gun aside from that scope, and it's because it's for a quick draw holster. So it's cool. Both his characters have these like quick draw kind of setup guns, and it's an iconic piece of equipment. And so you and I, you're on a revolver renaissance right now. I call it. Like you've always loved them. I've always loved them, but like we never really dove into that. In the same way that I was really hyper focused on the Bond guns, you really focused on curating a really immaculate collection in the 1911s, which I know that journey is nowhere near being over.
No.
In the same way for the Bond guns, for me, there's so many more for me to buy. But all that to say, every once in a while, it's cool to expand and become better and learn more and actually develop the collection a bit further, right? And you've got some really cool revolvers. We've got them in front of us right now, and I've got one coming my way, but we'll get to that once we get through yours.
Yeah, so I just wanted to quickly talk about it. So, of course, we're mainly focused on the 1917. So a little bit of history for you. Of course, as Caleb mentioned, this came from the second model hand ejector. As it's kind of told the triple lock is sort of Smith & Wesson's crown jewel at this time in the early 1900s. However, it was such a crown jewel, it was as expensive as a crown jewel. And a lot of, especially for like Canadian and British governments, they did not want to pay for things that were not necessary.
Well, just think about it this way, right? The U.S. military just got the 320 as a dedicated sidearm. And
sure,
Lord knows that gun is not the best choice on the market, but it sure was cheaper.
It was cheaper,
and
right.
So the hand, at least in this case, it was, okay, what do we need? What frills can we pull out? And one of them was that third lock.
Yep, the third lock, and as well as the ejector shroud.
Yep.
Which that actually ended up being a pretty good thing for them to pull out because, and there's not a ton of notes on it, but there are some notes of triple locks that went over to the trenches, and that channel will eat up mud.
Which makes sense because of like the holsters and stuff they'd wear it in, or if you're sitting like at those elevated angles they were to kind of go up over. I could see mud getting right into that trench very easily.
Yeah, and so if you couldn't close the cylinder,
right,
without cleaning that out, and that becomes
doesn't do you a lot of good.
This is certainly more, in my opinion, combat focused.
Yeah.
So what I have two. Well, I technically do have two 1917s. Both of them, or one of them is a Smith & Wesson, one of them is a Colt, and I think might have a third, which is a unmodified Colt 1917 on the way from guns.com. I'm kind of, it's sitting there and I'm kind of playing with it. Yeah. But I did get my Smith & Wesson 1917 from them as well. Now, the interesting thing about this gun is this, first of all, this is one of the best examples of a 1917 I've seen.
Well, it's a commercial, so it's really great
beautiful
shape.
Condition.
Yeah.
Bluing is gorgeous. It has the checkered stocks.
Also a benefit of the commercial.
Yes. And these guns were made with leftover parts from the war. So getting back to kind of the story, when the United States went to war, they kind of wanted, and it's pretty cool because it's very uncommon for armies to do this, especially at that time.
Yeah.
United States wanted to have every soldier have a pistol to go with their rifle.
Yep.
Which is wild, and that tells a lot about handgun culture in the United States, even back then. So they look at the 1911 production, and by that point, 1911s were being made by not only Colt, but by Remington UMC and the Springfield Armory. Not Springfield Armory that we know today, but the actual U.S. Armory at Springfield, Massachusetts. So,
and they were all above production, like they were a capacity rather. Like
they
were producing hand over fist as they could.
You're throwing those together as fast as you can, and I have a 1918 pistol that when you look at it, you will certainly you can tell they were throwing that gun together as fast as possible. So the Army the military kind of looked at what they could do to supplement 1911 production, and they ended up going to Smith & Wesson first. Smith & Wesson, obviously, at this point, had already converted their second model hand ejector from 4.55. It was originally a 45 Colt chambering. And they said, hey, can you make this for 45 automatic? Because the U.S. government didn't want to have a bunch of different, you didn't want to have a bunch of different shit to keep up with.
Well, yeah, you need standard cartridges, but also talking about just like production, the logistics and everything else, the handguns are going out the wazoo, and I'm sure on the ammunition side, very similar. So keep it consistent. Keep it simple, stupid. make it all one round, but there was a problem.
Yeah, well, and that is 45 automatic is for an automatic pistol. It's not for a revolver.
Yes.
In the fact of it doesn't have a rimmed case.
Yep. Which is not helpful for the ejector.
Not helpful. Well, not helpful for the ejector, and not helpful for the cartridge not just falling
straight through
the cylinder. So Smith & Wesson. Now, Smith & Wesson did some pretty unique things, in my opinion. They actually came up with two different ways to. I just wanted to check something here. This one has it. They came up with two different ways to hold those rounds in place. Mm-hmm. Okay, super unique. The first one being that, and this one has it. You can see it. You see, there's a chamfer right there on the inside of the cylinder.
Yeah, to actually catch the
chamber,
the bullet part
catches
of
the
the
rim.
cartridge.
Yeah, the rim right here.
Yep.
Of the case, so it'll actually hold it. Of course, you can't use your ejector because there is no rimmed.
There's no true
rim to use that with, but it'll hold it in place, which is pretty cool. And then the other way was moon clips. Moon clips, gangster as hell.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we're talking about the first real practical speed loader in a way, and it wasn't designed to be a speed loader. It was literally designed so you could use the ejector star.
But with it being on the half moons, it really did operate as an effective speed loader. And I think, people were carrying 3 sets of those in addition to their gun.
Yeah, it was like 20-something rounds, like 23 rounds, I think. The other thing is Smith & Wesson was really, really ramping these pistols. Their manufacturing capacity was pretty great, so they were beginning to really start to ramp these up. But they couldn't do it alone. So they actually were almost, to be honest, kind of forced to give some of their patent stuff regarding the 45 ACP in the cylinder to Colt, which then they started. I believe it was the new service that they converted to their M1917 45 ACP. So I actually have one of those as well. This one's been Fitzed.
It's pretty rad.
This one's a directly post-war, so this is 1919. The commercial Smith & Wesson, it was probably assembled. The parts were actually made sometime during the war,
right? But
it was assembled post-war. The reason for that is they really were ramping up for that 1919 spring offensive. We were really about to put some freaking meat into the grinder there.
Yeah, if the Germans didn't fold, they were
and the Germans folded early, and no one. And I think this is one of the very few times in history where the writing wasn't necessarily on the wall.
No, World War II surrounding Berlin going down, very clear, and a lot of times in history it happens that way. But trench warfare was inches at a time, and so it was kind of like who's going to hold out.
Well, in 1918, the war became a little bit more movement focused.
Yeah.
The hard trench lines weren't as stable as they had been in the past. But even with successes, the Germans were still seeing their own success, and so no one really thought that would that the Germans would eventually fold. And of course, a lot of other things happened after that.
Yes,
but get to the point of the 1917 specifically, there was a ton of leftover parts and guns that were halfway finished. So by this point, Smith & Wesson actually was quote owned or ran by the government. They had some issues between Smith & Wesson and the government during 1917 and 18. So the government came in and kind of took control. They did give it back to Smith & Wesson, and by that point, they kind of decided, well, we'll just commercially blue these guns, nice checkered stocks, and we'll offer them,
as a true commercial piece.
Yeah. And so that's what this gun is, which is really cool. The Colt that I have, which has been Fitzed in the period correct version, and Fitzed just meaning the trigger guard's been cut, the barrel's been cut, hammer bobbed, lots of things, but this is a period Fitz gun. It is actually a U.S. property gun. Yep. Well, it was a U.S. property gun. Now it's a Fitz. And I didn't do that. That was done sometime in the 20s and 30s.
Sure.
This was done. But Colt, the Colt and Smith & Wesson 1917s, I tend to lean a little bit towards the Smith & Wesson. Now these two aren't fair because one is a badass Fitz gun.
Yes.
But the Smith & Wesson is to me a little bit. It just goes back to kind of the trigger mechanism, which we talked about.
Yeah,
Colts stack a little bit more than Smith & Wesson. Smith & Wessons have a really nice kind of mechanical clunk lock at the end of the trigger.
To me,
sight.
there's always something special about a large frame Smith. the Model 29s, the whole nine, like the whole 9 yards. The triggers, the double action is just astounding. And I think too, even the wartime guns, I think Smith, the finish, the fit, just the aesthetic, really. Sure. The Colt ones, they look like service guns, and you kind of have to look at the Smiths to see if it's a property gun. Like you have to take an extra, aside from like the stocks.
The stocks will give it away.
But other than that, it can take a second to kind of do that check. And so I was really excited because I picked up, also from guns.com. It's funny, the 1917 Colt that you're looking at, I almost grabbed thinking that it was the gun I was looking for, only to realize it was a Colt. So I hit the pause button. But I just did a quick search on guns for a word that I wasn't even expecting, because I was like, okay, great. I want to do an indie gun. Next thing I'm going to do, I know that. How are we going to go about it? Like, okay, well, they don't have a 1917, so let's go see if they have the Webley. Let's go see if they have the Webley, which is what he carried in Last Crusade. Sean Connery. I'm like, cool, perfect. Bond tie-ins, super fun. I search Webley on guns.com, and like one of the first things that comes up is an incredible hand ejector 2 for a smoking deal.
Because they had it listed as 455 Webley.
Yeah. So it was just listed.
So the keyword hit. Yes, the hit for that.
It hit the Webley, exactly. That's cool. It hit the cartridge. So I'm scrolling through the Webleys. I'm like, oh my god, it's a hand ejector too. Like, and
for a dumb deal.
Those guns,
I couldn't believe it actually.
No, so he and I were calling back and forth. I was doing stuff for brother-in-law's wedding, and he was driving around too. I'm like, hey, I'll call you back in 5. And I call him back, and I'm screaming his name. I go, Eli. He's like, what? I'm like, I just got in the car. We've been talking about this. I did one last search. Oh my god, they have the gun, and it's I love you. It's been a great week. I'm gonna miss the hell out of you. But aside from seeing my beautiful wife and my dog, I'm very excited to go go get that hand ejector too, man, because that's a gun that I've been dreaming about for a long time. And
when you've been fondling my 17,
yes, I have.
I'll be happy to see you go home.
Yeah, there's only so much rim oil I can put that thing after touching it. So
yeah,
it's a really, really cool gun. And what I love about mine, I think I mentioned this in like my speed voice here, and I'll slow it down to really emphasize how cool it is. Mine is a Lend-Lease era British proof marked pistol.
It is, and it's got them all.
It's the Brits are really fond of stamping stuff.
Man, they just
the King of England was one of the first dudes to get tattoos back in the day. I don't know if that just
is that right?
Yeah, it was a very regal thing until like the cheap pin gun became a thing.
That's wild.
And
man.
So
they did mark everything,
and they mark everything,
and it has that darker finish too.
Yeah, and it has checkered grips with medallions too. So
oh yeah, well, we know it's a British gun, not a Canadian.
Yeah, we can confirm based on the proof marks that they're British proofs. Sweet. And that's what the guns thing listed, and I saw them, and they looked like British proof marks that I had seen from doing the Bond book research from other firearms, because we had a British proof marked World War I era 1911 that's in the book. Super cool, and yeah, that gun too. It looked like some dude had a stamp and just started thudding it all over the place.
Just decided, it needs one here. It needs one here.
But I am gonna indie that gun. I am gonna cut it down to the 4-inch and put the ramp sight on it.
As someone that is really into the historical provenance of pistols, and knowing that gun is worth
a lot more than what we got it for.
I would say triple to quadruple what you paid for. I mean, I'm being dead serious.
No, yeah. And that's without work.
Based on, there was a hand ejector 455 at the gun show that we just were at. What was that, 2 days ago?
Yeah.
For like 21, 22.
Yeah.
Something in that range. And you paid.
They go comfortably in like the 2.5 range.
And you paid not even
close.
You paid a fraction of that.
Yeah.
I was shocked. The other thing.
There's a reason why I screamed your name. And honestly, I was stressed for a week because, I had been traveling and I reached out to them and, they're like, I'm like, oh, and then it went out of stock. I'm like, okay, it was like 30 minutes later. Hopefully that,
Well, you didn't know you got it till
I was here.
Yeah.
It was about a week
of
later.
All the traveling.
Yeah, exactly. And so I got the confirmation, and then it landed at my FFL about the same day I landed here.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. The interesting thing about that gun is it is, we can only presume,
based on the photos.
Based on the photos, it looks shaved.
Yeah, which for those who don't know, a lot of these guns when they came back post-war, they made it back in the U.S. market. Folks would shave the cylinder down to accept 45 auto rim or, in theory, the moon clips as well. The trouble being, though, they weren't really done super well.
No.
Looking at the gun I've got looks beautiful. The finish looks great, all this, but it maybe just is the angle of the shot. But based on the way the cylinder looks, it looks a little wavy.
Well,
looks like there's some low spots and high points in the daylight between the cylinder and the frame.
And you'll be able to tell too as soon as you pop that cylinder out.
Oh,
because
yeah.
more than likely they didn't refinish.
Oh, I'm sure they didn't at all.
The face of that cylinder.
Well, if it's as half-assed as we think it definitely didn't throw anything.
And
on
so, if it not though, it may be a legitimate 455 cylinder. Yeah. Just the picture. It's so hard to tell in pictures sometimes.
And that'll be one of the things I'll do is I'm working with my buddy Keith Ford, and we're going to, just for the sake of security, because a lot of people did shave them, and you see some horror stories and photos of those things blowing up because they ruin the integrity of it. And not you're also not getting the actual, you're not creating a successful.
Well, in the words of the prophet Ron Swanson, you never want to half-ass two things. Just whole-ass.
Just whole-ass the one thing, right. So we're going to slap a 45 cylinder in that gun to make it safe and stable to actually be a shooter. At some point it'll be really cool to have a 455 just to have, but...
So you're going to do the 45 ACP cylinder.
Yes.
You're going to cut the barrel down to 4 inches.
4 inches, and then we're going to do the custom ramped front sight.
And you're going to do the ramped front sight. Is there anything else that you'll do with that gun?
Yeah, we're going to...
Probably do an action job.
Keith is a wizard with Smith & Wesson actions, so we're going to do that as well, and I'm going to document the whole process.
There aren't too many wizards of Colt actions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, I had to replace the V mainspring in that 1917, and I'm going to tell you right now, I said what the fuck a lot.
Yeah. I think that's also the reason why people love Smith revolvers so much.
Yeah.
Out of the box, they're really great, but a knowledgeable Smith can really elevate it far beyond what it already is, which is phenomenal. And so I'm excited to make a shooting functional gun that isn't just like we talked about at the top, where it was like the style, not just being like cosplay. Like I don't go hiking with a fedora and a leather jacket. I'm like, yeah, a good field shirt and light wash denim does it for me. I'm done. Check. I want to be able to carry that gun when I'm not carrying the Alchemy, or if I'm cool like Indy, have a vertical shoulder rig for my full, my automatic pistol, which by the way in the film was supposed to be a 1911.
But we go right back to the blank issue.
Yeah, the blank issue that we were talking about earlier. So
and
but imagine a dual 45 set. Though.
Well, and hero guns are hard to skimp on, right?
Yes.
Like you don't want to give the hero gun a star,
right? So the high power was a better choice for sure because it gets a lot of up close shots. Because we talk about like the situational humor of the indie movies. That whole bar fight is shoot them both, and then the dude that he's sparring with hears that and pulls Indy's gun arm down so they can shoot the guys. So it's all the situation. So that gun is in a lot of up close and personal shots. So it had to be something that could actually cycle, and it had to be something that was somewhat period correct. Now that gun arguably is not. It at one point is an Ingles model, which came out like 10 years after the movie is set. The gun appears 1 year after its production, and you probably wouldn't have had one.
It was in 1936.
Yeah, I believe so.
So 1935 is when the high power. Yeah, it would have been hard. It wouldn't have been impossible,
right.
But it would have.
The
been...
1911 would have made a lot of sense. You can tell, and if the armor was really being thoughtful too, which we'll give them. I try to give film armorers more credit than they're due sometimes because I think they are more stymied by production realities or the company that they're with than they are. I think a lot of them actually are gun people based on the interviews and stuff that I've seen. Some of them aren't at all. Don't get me wrong.
No, sure.
The rush shooting doesn't happen out of the blue. Like it happens because people are untrained and unfamiliar do things. But there are people that really do care. And so I could really see something thoughtfully curated, like a 45 revolver matched with a 45 automatic. So like what we were talking about with trench warfare in the U.S. military, one cartridge.
Yep.
So he carries the one thing. So that's kind of my thought. Make It Jones leather does some really cool stuff. He makes a vertical shoulder holster like Indy's. You do see it again. The documentary is worth a watch because everyone discovered the question of where the high power appears, because at one point he's shooting his revolver, the next point it's a high power. Everyone kind of assumed it was a continuity error. Really cool shot in that from behind the scenes in the documentary where his leather jacket is off, and with his field shirt he's got a vertical kind of like that Y yoke looking shoulder holster that could either fit a 1911 or a high power with the high power in it. So there's the answer to that question.
Yeah, and so it is really cool that you're going to round that out.
And it fits what we do too, right?
Yeah,
I love my Alchemy. It's my daily driver a lot of the time. It's the gun I like to bring to the outdoors with me. So two of those, and then something a little larger bore or rifle for when it's like bear territory, like big bear territory. We're there.
Well, and that should be a really cool gun to do, anyways. It'll
be a really cool shooter.
Well, I always appreciate your willingness to be correct. I mean, it's going to be a 4.55, but it's going to have it's not going to be a you're going to do the correct front sight, for that gun, all that good stuff. And I know Keith is going to get you. It's going to be a really sweet.
It's going to be really cool.
So 1917 revolvers. Honestly, it's one of my top 3 favorite revolvers of all time. I feel like too, as a 1911 guy, it's kind of the 1911 guy's revolver.
It is, and I'm a Kansas City native. Kansas City came together after the war, put up a privately built monument to the First World War that now is the National Museum and Monument. So World War I's always had a very special place in my heart, even though it's not a lot of the historical conversation. I think it's often neglected.
Oh, gosh.
I feel like it's the 90s of warfare in terms of like the 20th century. Like it kind of it's a transitory thing. People know that it happened. And then even like in history class, you like touch on what happened. Everyone knows, Archduke Franz Ferdinand gets yoinked, and then everything kind of falls into play. And then Hitler does his thing, and then World War II starts, and then that's where all the books and the movies and everything falls in. So the pop culture and everything is tied into the aftermath in the Second World War. I think the First World War, I go to the museum once a year. I always have. I have my whole life, and I go to the monument. I spend a lot of time there. And so, and I know there's still a ton for me to learn, but it's held a special place for me to have a World War I era revolver like that is really special.
Well, and I would love to see, kind of talking a little bit about the neglect of that era, I would love to see a World War I movie with some proper American propaganda. And there's been some American,
Well, because some of the best movies about World War I are like All Quiet on the Western Front, which is a phenomenal book, or 1917, speaking of the number, but that's focused on the British. Like we don't get the American, like the doughboys going in and taking care of business.
The only one that I can really think of off the top of my head is the Lost Battalion.
But don't you just want to see?
But I want to see like a modern, and like I'm going to be honest, and we've talked about this, talking about movies. I don't really. I'm gonna, and this is gonna piss people off. I don't really give a shit how perfectly historically accurate movies.
The League
are.
Of the Ministry of
Ungentlemanly Warfare. That's a perfect example.
Yeah, Guy Ritchie do a World War I.
But you know what?
Let's see it.
And here's the deal: is it always inspires that? Because guess what I did as soon as I watched that movie? I pulled up a YouTube video
about
the actual real
operations,
operation.
Or you'll read the book. I think that's for a lot of folks. It's what we like doing, right? That's why I like James Bond as, again, an entry point into real history for folks. Even the book that we wrote about the guns of James Bond focuses on James Bond, but it's a lot of focus on the real world history, use case, and operators, because I think tying it all together means a lot. James Bond, like Indiana Jones or like Magnum PI, is a lens to focus onto the world.
You should definitely talk about the Chronicles of Young Indy, because that is exactly what was done.
Yeah. That's such a good series. You can find it on Prime, but they move stuff around so much. I'm buying physical copies because they had them on Disney Plus and they pulled them down. But the Chronicles of the Adventures of Young Indiana Jones, or however the hell they framed it, George Lucas went out and he said, we're going to do something revolutionary and kind of crazy. He made these like hour and a half long, 2 hour long movies that kind of drop a young Indiana Jones, like literally 8 years old. He meets Lawrence of Arabia in the first episode, My First Adventure. He goes and explores the pyramids. And it goes through him in the wartime era as a teenager. He runs away from home. He rides with Pancho Villa for a little bit.
Hell yeah.
He goes from there, he gets captured by him, then he rides with them, and then he joins the Belgian army because he can't get into the U.S.
That's referenced in Last Crusade.
No, you're thinking Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Well, no. I'm talking about when Sean Connery says you ran away just as you got interesting.
Oh, yeah, he said that, but I was thinking Crystal Skull because Mutt Williams asks him how he learned some obscure native dialect. And
and that's when
he's like, I wrote with Pancho Villa. He said, no, you didn't. Like, so it's nice. That series, so good. And it's so off the cuff. At one point, he's like fighting for the love of a woman against Hemingway. Like the two of them are fighting for a woman. He's riding with Lawrence of Arabia. He's a spy for a little bit. He's in the desert of Africa fighting Daniel Craig as a Nazi, or not a Nazi, but as a German,
as an imperial German,
as an imperial German, mustache and all.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I have to watch that.
So, and George Lucas did that for history classes. His goal was to create this incredible series that people could sit down and watch and inspire kids to learn about history. And so, he gets out of the warfare, he goes home post-war, and suddenly he's in Chicago right as Al Capone comes into town on the heels of taking care of business outside of town. He's fleeing some murder rap, and now he's setting up shop in Chicago, doing that whole thing, and then he's learning jazz, and oh my gosh, it's a wild ride, because you honestly, if you haven't seen it before, you don't know what you're going to get. You might get a heartfelt, very well shot, devastating film about trench warfare, or you might get him dating 8 girls while doing a play in New York. Like, it's worth the watch.
Yeah, and so, with that, you're 1917, obviously inspired by Indiana Jones, coming off, y'all, your James Bond waterboarding. But I'm happy to see more revolvers. Of course, as you know, the 1917 was my only revolver that I owned in May.
Things have changed.
There are, I think,
he's picked up 2 since I've been here for a week.
Yes. Well, I think there's like 10 or 11 revolvers now. We just got the 1931 Smith & Wesson 3844 heavy duty.
That was a really great find.
Yeah, that was cool. And I enjoyed the guy I bought it from too.
Which is always the best part.
Family. Yeah. 5-inch in a really good, probably 75 to 80% condition. Mm-hmm. Maybe more than that.
Yeah, it depends on how you classify little bit of barrel wear and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's as far as the lockup is insane.
It looks like a gun that lived in a holster but didn't get a lot of trigger pulls.
Dude, bore is in excellent condition. The lockup, that gun actually has one of the tightest lockups of any of my guns, actually. So
it was a great find.
And I thought that the guy had worked it over, because apparently he's a big revolver smith. And he told me
he said he just picked it up, and he was very fair.
Oh yeah, well,
that was a great show. Everything was pretty fairly priced.
Oh, it was. Yeah, that was.
There was
awesome.
For the Bond folks that are listening, there was a really great P5 example there in the box that was not unreasonably priced. There was a PP Super in 9x18.
Which I had never seen that before.
Pretty cool. That was the last ditch effort to make the PP series something functional before they basically went out of business and then got rebought. So that's their fault for going for a Russian round, but that is what it is.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, I think with that, because we are running a little bit tight on time, I wanted to give a little bit of time for you to decompress before we go to the airport.
Yeah, totally.
But with that being said, hey, thank y'all so much for joining us. It's been a wonderful, wonderful week. I've really enjoyed your company, Caleb. And
frankly, guys, for the show purposes, we're always rounding this out. We spend a lot of time together as much as we can, but oftentimes when Eli and I are together, we're working really fast, really hard, and it's nonstop. So a whole week, even though we really did work at that capacity, really great. And I think you guys will appreciate it in episodes to come, because more adventures shared, more guns handled together. So there's a lot more crossover in what we can actually competently talk about each other's collections. I brought some guns. He has his guns, and
you got to handle a Vietnam Swenson.
That was that was really cool. I mean, we got to go to some cool gun shops, and so there's all that to say.
Yes, how did I forget about that?
Oh, well, so yeah, we got some
real quick. Yeah, real quick. So there's this gun store by my house, really close, walking distance, which is dangerous. Actually, where I bought my 1914 Steyr Hahn.
And the guy is so cool.
Old, they're just kind of old country. I mean,
well, as it is, he told me, he's like, I don't get around like I used to, boy. I'm 85.
Well, and his son, who is, probably in his 50s, runs the shop mainly.
Sure.
But you saw when he walked outside.
Yeah.
Coveralls, barefooted.
Oh, yeah.
And he's the gunsmith.
He was gunsmithing. I mean, you heard
big old long beard.
There's nothing to me more manly than a guy who is in there, and I heard like a wheel spinning. So he's grinding and sanding metal barefoot in his shop.
Coveralls, and he had the jeweler's glasses.
Yeah, jeweler glasses.
That he just threw up when he came out. Just a really honestly, that would be an awesome black and white picture in that because it's called Ledford Trading Post, but it kind of looks like a trading post. It looks like an old place.
If you needed a visual for it, just go to any gun shop in Red Dead 2.
Yeah, I mean, no, seriously,
it really
seriously,
fits.
that's what it looked like.
Because not only is he like that, you walk in and it's curated well. So it's not just like a lot of these small.
There was not
shops.
A single plastic gun in there.
Nothing plastic. But there's floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, which is what we're getting to.
It's crazy. You don't go into gun stores and see literature.
No, which is especially these used ones. It makes me really sad because a lot of things, and we talk about Eli and I talk about this a lot in person. Is like what drove me mad about doing the book research because I'm very like scholarship research oriented from being a giant debate nerd back in the day. I couldn't find good writing at all about a lot of these guys, like because a lot of these books had been published and they've been out of print for 50 years or more.
Right.
And some examples of these books, if you even know what you're looking for, cost $200. This guy had gun literature. First of all, the books alone, amazing, well kept, great condition. He had some in plastic if they were falling apart, so he was really taking good care of dust jackets, the hardcovers, the whole 9 yards. But what really threw us off was I walk in and we're going to walk out the door and I see a milk carton and I'm like, my head immediately goes, oh, cool, vinyl.
He said like $5 on it.
Yeah, it's just $5, and I just assumed it was like I honestly assumed because a lot of times you see it's on the bottom shelf behind stuff. You see that in an old shop. It's usually records, and I love looking through them because you can usually find something cool. No, it was vintage gun catalogs. This guy had been collecting the dealer
which
catalog.
I've never seen those.
No, because most of these were dealer packets,
and they
too.
just throw them away after
they use the pieces out of them. Well, oftentimes, like. They use them, right? Like they had the quick order form.
Yeah.
They because you can't order online, so pre-packaged envelopes with the little things to make it as efficient as possible. You just don't see that stuff. So we're going through this, and we find some of the coolest vintage gun marketing I've ever seen. Eli found some awesome. I'm passing him all the old American brand stuff because I know he really likes that. And not
you got that really cool Detonics one.
Yes, I did. That was super cool with the typed
the
letter on it.
Yep. You got Detonics. You got the inner arms with
the inner arms, the PBK stuff.
You got and the cream of your crop was the HK
83. It says
packet with like in the envelope they sent it to, which is super fucking cool.
Yeah.
And then I got the Springfield Armory in like 1987 with Robbie Latham.
Yes.
A picture of Robbie Latham drawing. Well, it's like an illustration of him drawing on it. Which I pretty much only got that because it had a picture of Robbie Latham.
Yeah, the illustrations on these old catalogs, so cool. And you found some really cool illustrations.
Yes. So I got that one. I got a Smith & Wesson that was fully illustrated.
Yep.
I mean, other than the pictures of the guns.
Everything else was like painted.
Fully illustrated, yeah. So that was really cool. And I think that was like an 80s.
I think it was like 83, 84, maybe even 88.
Something like that. And then the really cool one was the Ruger packet.
Yes.
The Ruger.
We found 2 packets, and we both walked away grinning ear to ear. Honestly, I wish we had Candid Cam going when Eli opened the Ruger one because that was the stuff of dreams.
Yeah, so the Ruger one had a ton of stuff in it, more than even the HK packet.
Yeah.
And it had a freaking poster.
Dealer posters.
Three posters. One was like a full Revolver lineup, and I think on the back it was like the rifles and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I would assume pick whichever one you wanted on there.
This was stuff that was sent to the dealers so they could display in the store to sell some guns.
The other one was a freaking cross section, and a big cross section of a Security 6.
Security 6, yeah.
Super gangster. And then the other one was, as long as this table, a poster of the Mini 14.
What did it say on it?
It said America's most expensive blinker, which
so
is just
funny.
like a funny, and so.
But all these are like folded up to fit in the original, the original packet.
Yep. And so
we're just kind of discovering this stuff.
Yeah, and I pulled that out and I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, speaking of archaeology.
And I think you paid like $10 for everything.
Oh my gosh.
You got
a Walther book too. Yeah. Know your Walthers or something like that.
And then
speaking of Walther books, thank you.
Right.
Eli bought me a beautiful set as a gift. 3 of the Rankin books. Those are really hard to come by. I'll have some really cool photos of them when I get home.
Yeah, they're cool books. I had no clue what they were worth when I got them. But
he said that, and I about dropped my phone. He's like, I found these. Like, oh my god, they're paying Rolex prices for me.
Yeah, they're super cool. I saw that the one has Hitler's pistol in it.
Mm-hmm.
So not that that's cool. It did end the European conflict.
Yeah.
But anyways, and then he threw mine in. I bought a.
You had bought that.
A bayonet. Yeah. So I was looking for a 1917 bayonet for my trench gun. So I have it's not a reproduction Winchester.
Sure.
It's just a converted.
You reconverted it back to where it was because it had been converted commercially, and you've reconverted it back to its original settings.
So, and it's not, and I would never ever try to pass it off as a real trench gun, you know. But anyways, I still wanted a bayonet because of America, and so I was looking for a 1917 bayonet. They had a 1907 British pattern. I was like, I don't think, I think the hilt is a little longer on those or shorter. I don't remember.
Something different about it.
But I was like, you know, and I had a reproduction one, but it damn near wouldn't fit, and I didn't want to have to sit there and file for days to get it to fit.
We had enough equipment failures this week to do that.
Yeah, and I just didn't have time for it, and so I was
patience.
You know, he always has a bunch of bayonets in there, and so I was looking at a 1917 rifle, and I look up, and there's the bayonet on it. And I always assumed, because I never bought a bayonet rifle from him, I just assumed that the price included the bayonet.
Sure.
Oh, no, he just threw bayonets on those. And, you
just
know,
for looks.
If you end up buying that gun, he would probably give you a deal on the bayonet. I don't know. So I took it off, and I was like, man, this is a weird looking 1917. Come to find out, I've never seen it before. It's a freaking Vietnam era 1917. And, like, at first, you think it's not real. Well, of course, the guy with a massive library of gun stuff.
Yeah, he took me back to the back room to show me, because he saw me digging around the books while Eli was gawking at the sword on the end of a gun. He's like, "Oh, you like the books, boy?" I'm like, "I love the books." He's like, "Let me show you something." He took me out back, and he had 3 rooms of just books, floor to ceiling.
So, yeah, and I ended up picking up this 1917 General Cutlery Vietnam, 1960s or something like that, Vietnam era bayonet, and it's really
in the
cool.
sheath with the literature.
It was a really cool pickup, and you know, I had never seen him before, so I did a quick internet search and quickly realized it was very below market.
Yet another screaming deal.
Yeah, it was very below market, so I just decided we'd go do that. And then, of course, when I showed interest in and I'd already paid for it at that point. Because you saw those on our way out.
Yeah, I saw them on the way out, and we just kind of came back in and did some more. And so
he just was like, "Here you go."
Yeah, he said, "Here you go to you." I put 2 catalogs. I pull out a 20 because the book was 10. The catalogs are 5 each. 20 and 1 or 2 for change. He's like, 1087 and Merry Christmas.
Oh, you know, you said Happy Birthday.
Happy Birthday.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, thank you.
So it's really cool. But anyway,
all that to say, guys, like, I know it always sounds like we're stupid lucky when we find stuff like this, but all it takes is going out and looking for things.
Yeah.
Like, this gun shop was walking distance from Eli's house, comfortably. Not
very hole in the wall. I mean,
very hole in the wall.
You would, if you were driving through town, you would be unsuspecting.
Yep. And, sometimes take a chance on that stuff. Other times, you're like me and Jake at 1911 Syndicate in Wichita for a show, and we walk in, and you go to a local pawn shop, because sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And the guy tells you that he's more of a Glock 40 man himself, and you find your way out the door.
40 model.
Nope.
40 caliber.
He likes collecting 40 caliber Glocks, and I said, "Wow, didn't know people had that kind of poor taste."
Yeah,
I thought poor taste like that was mostly left for Beretta to do NFTs.
Oh God, do not get me started on that. What in the hell are they thinking? Like, who at Beretta said, "Hey, we're going to make it the art, but we're going to make it not the art. We're going to make it on the computer,
and we're going to make the computer do it. It's AI.
Yeah.
It's all AI
we're
generated.
Make it the this computer. It is a Picasso." And then guess what? I'm like, well, hell, can't you just screenshot the son of a bitch?
Yeah, I had to explain NFTs to Eli, and he's like, "That sounds fake." I'm like, "You're absolutely right."
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny. Like, he is my modern translator on a lot of stuff. And so I go to Caleb for a lot of things, actually. Very often, I'm calling Caleb, "What the fuck does this mean?" And
who needs a dictionary or a thesaurus or an encyclopedia?
Yeah. I just call Caleb, and I say, "Caleb, what the hell is an NFT?" And he was like,
I spent a few minutes trying to explain.
Yeah, he's like, "Well, it's internet art," and I'm like, "But I don't get it." And he's like, "Well, yeah, that's part of it." And I'm just like, man, that is some stupid shit.
And is it not the gun industry also to be like 3 to 4 years too late on something like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the NFTs had their hot spot during like the early post-Rona era.
But
like, it was like the cool thing when like people were still talking about like the Dogecoin going to the moon and stuff. Like,
I don't even know what that is.
Digital currency. We'll do an episode on.
I'm gonna be honest with you. People talk to me about cryptocurrency, and I must sound like the dumbest son of a bitch.
You know what, Eli? You put faith in .45 ACP, walnut, blued steel.
That's
Put
right.
it in gold,
That's
brother.
right. That's right. Yeah.
Put it in the gold you can see, not the gold that's online.
Yeah. I'm just like, well, how do you mine it? And that's a whole nother, like this one person was like, yeah, I'm going to be mining for some Bitcoin. I'm
You're like, you don't look like no coal miner.
What the fuck is that, man? You're out here wearing damn loafers and a collared shirt. You're not mining for shit. The only thing you're mining for, son, is an ass whooping. Also, I introduced Caleb this week to some WWE. So if you hear some Stone Cold Steve Austin, or what was it where you did the double bird and I was like a proud dad? I mean, you did something.
You're sitting in the car and
you like hit the double bird like Stone Cold, and I was like, oh my god, he likes men. That sort of thing, that realization. But anyways, yeah. So I introduced Caleb to Stone Cold, which has been an experience.
It has been an experience.
I also found out that WWE is on, what was that?
Was it Paramount?
It's either Paramount or Peacock.
Yeah, I think it was Peacock. They had all of the
King
of the Ring.
Yeah, I saw King of the Ring. I said, well, hell, it's too early for King of the Ring. I was like, wait, that's old King of the Ring.
Yeah.
So
every season of it.
I'm pretty stoked for that. Anyways, we've rambled.
Which is what we do best.
Man, this episode, I think, has encapsulated more of the steel and style than anything else, because it's been a hell of
it's been a journey.
But we're appreciative that you went on this journey with us. And look, we're right at the hour mark. Or, well, we're a little over, actually.
That's right, where we like to rest.
It's close.
For a weekday show, that's where we want to be.
Yep. So thank y'all again for joining us. Remember to check out guns.com. Of course, Hold Up Displays is a great place. And remember, carry cocked and locked and get you a nice gun. Okay. Let's be honest. You don't need 15 plastic pieces of shit. Just get you one badass gun.
You can't tell me that throwing a ghost trigger disconnect or whatever in a Glock is even on the same playing field as getting an old revolver cut down to meet your specs. And in terms of like mods, buy yourself some cool guns, make them your own. Do it the right way. Don't bastardize it in your garage. Go to a professional gunsmith. Work with a craftsman. Please, for the love of God, this is not me condoning cutting up old guns just for the sake of cutting them up.
Just for cutting them up. Yeah, if you're going to cut it up, make it look good.
Do it right. Put the money and time into it. Yeah. At least enjoy the example that you have out of the gate. Go to some local gun shows. You might be pleasantly surprised, even though they've hurt you in the past. And it's I think that's a good way to end. Yeah, take some chances. It'll be a good time.
All right. Well, we're going to get Caleb to the airport. We appreciate you. We had a great time together, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you later.